so what they do is they have to, it takes some time to evaluate how much money you're actually entitled to in back pay, because with SSI checks, as you know, the back pay comes in 3 installments over 12 months. So it's a couple $1,000 in the first kind of month or two after you get your notice award. You get another couple $1,000 at the 6-month mark, and then the remaining of your back pay at the 12-month mark. Welcome to the Evans Disability Podcast. We hope to be your definitive guide through the Social Security Administration landscape. I'm Peter Evans, your host and managing partner at Evans Disability, a law firm that handles disability cases throughout the United States. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to mention a special resource for our listeners. Click the link below to receive a free SSA disability guide from Evans Disability. This guide is packed with details on SSA disability programs, expert tips for winning your case, and sample questions from actual disability hearings. Join me as I sit down with special guests, including experienced lawyers, our extremely well-trained staff, and even a former Social Security law judge. If you find our content useful, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on our latest discussions. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. One of the questions I wanted to kind of ask you is, and we did a podcast with Haley about how to navigate the notice of award, and she talks about how far back you can get paid. And that you bring up a great point. And the question is if you do disagree with Social Security and how they, the date they found you disabled, what is it that you're actually fighting for regarding your back pay? Because that's really what you're fighting for, is more back pay, because you're going to get your ongoing month-to-month benefits. So then you're saying, hey, look, I'm giving up this back pay if I don't appeal. And in making that determination, what is it just generally, and I'll link the Navigating Notice of Award in the description, but what is it that you look at when you're having these conversations with people? Like, how far can a DIP case actually be paid back? Because I gave an example of, March something of 2018. But if they find me disabled of March something of 2020, and I'm like, as a client, I really want 2018. What would you say then? And also, how far back can they pay in an SSI case?
Yeah. So with a Title II disability insurance, DIB or SSDI cases, they can be paid as far back as 1 year prior to the filing date. So when you actually submit your application does matter. It's not just an argument of when your disability started, but when did you file your claim? That impacts how far back the back pay can potentially be paid. And with SSI, with Title 16 Supplemental Security Income, they can pay you as far back as the first full month of your filing date. So the back pay with SSI, there is less to go further back with an SSI claim. But when we were talking earlier, and this is why, again, it's just like I really advise people to talk to a legal representative specializing in disability case. SSI does not have that 5 full month waiting period that SSDI does. So there's a lot of nuances and things to calculate. Another thing that we hadn't talked about yet is with we're talking about back pay, but there is also the potential that accepting a different onset date from Social Security may disqualify you from one of the programs that you applied for. Let's say you did apply for both SSDI and SSI. They say, okay, you're disabled. Certainly as of today, you can get ongoing benefits. But we don't think your disability started back in 2018 or 2019 when you said your disability started in your application. There is something called a date last insured for those Title II SSDI or DIB claims. And it is important that your established onset date is on or before that date last insured. I'm sure you've got deeper dives into this, but this is one of those things in a quote unquote partially favorable decision. If you're not careful in analyzing the entirety of your case, of the programs you applied for and your eligibility, you could potentially be giving up not just back pay, but ongoing benefits from a program with more protection. SSI has all of these nickel and diming deductions that I'm very frustrated with that you don't have with SSDI. So but you have to prove that your disability started on or before a certain date for SSDI. And that is something that, again, a lawyer's office will look out for, that most people may not be aware of because this is not their field of specialty. They paid into a system thinking it would be there for them. But with all of these little bits of fine print, if you're not careful, you may accept a decision that ends up not awarding you the disability insurance benefits that you paid into during your working life.
Yeah, and that's really important. And just the difference between established onset date versus alleged onset date. Alleged onset date is what the claimant or the client or the person applying for Social Security is alleging the date they became disabled.
Yes.
It's the date they want to be found disabled. Established onset date is the date Social Security is saying, this is the established date we actually found you disabled on. And if those two dates are different, that's why we use the phrase established onset date versus alleged onset date. If the established onset date is after your date last insured, you're correct. It not only gives up future benefits or back pay, but you're giving up, and you don't go through the appeal process correctly, you potentially are giving up all the credits you worked and paid into Social Security to be eligible for disability insurance benefits.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
A quick question. As someone who looks at these letters quite often, and you and I both have, but I like to ask you the questions. How would a person who is maybe looking at this sort of paperwork for the first time know if they've received a decision or a notice of award that is either disability insurance benefits versus SSI? What will it say on the paperwork that you've seen that they can just distinguish so they're not confused? Because I get a lot of questions like, oh, I got this letter, and I thought I won. Yeah.
I would look if this is coming from your local Social Security office and not from a hearing office. I would look at the top of the letter. It'll first say Social Security Administration, and then right below it, it will usually talk about the program title. So for disability insurance, it's a Title II claim. Title II of the Social Security Act also includes retirement and survivors benefits. So you'll often see them lumped together. It'll say retirement, survivors, and disability insurance at the top. That is for your SSDI, also called DIB, your Title II claim. It'll have the information about that. And usually in the first paragraph, if you apply for multiple programs, if you also have an SSI claim, it'll say you'll get a separate letter regarding your SSI benefits. Most of the times you will get a separate letter. I would say at least 10 to 20% of the time it won't come, and you'll have to, you or your lawyer's office will have to hound them for that next letter. If it's for supplemental security income, again, at the top, right under Social Security Administration, it will typically say supplemental security income. So the program titles are right under the Social Security Administration's banner. You and I have been doing this job long enough to know that even though it's a federal program, even their letters are not uniform through all Social Security offices. This is just kind of the standard model that we've seen, but you may see a letter that is formatted or even worded differently. Why I think going with an office, especially an office that is national, so we're accustomed to seeing how letters look differently between various offices. We're not all just like, oh, we know what the Vancouver or the Portland, Oregon offices look like their letters. No, we've seen all sorts of different type of letters from throughout the country, from the various local offices, from the state disability offices that have even more varied formatting. But yeah, look at the top. That'll usually announce the program title that you're applying for, and the one that's being discussed in the mailing.
The other thing, the other question I had for you is, you brought up that if someone's found medically disabled, that they get these letters, they'll have the date in it. But you also said sometimes they don't get that; they just get a notice of award from some offices. Are appeal rights also listed in the notice of award?
Appeal rights are only listed in the notice of award. So if you get a letter saying you've been found medically disabled, you can look up and down. I've never seen one that says you have appeal rights because it's not a final decision. It's just kind of an informative notice from Social Security that a medical determination has been made, but it isn't an official decision because Social Security still needs to make the non-medical decision. Now, in a Title II DIB SSDI claim, I've never seen one where by that point, Social Security hasn't confirmed that the person is eligible for SSDI. That means they paid enough into the system and during the and has coverage during the alleged period of disability. It's much more an issue for supplemental security income claimants, where there's going to be this gap between being found medically disabled and then that pre-effectuation review conference we had talked about earlier, where the SSI claims, non-medical, the financial requirements will be analyzed.
And if a claimant disagrees, let's say on the SSI side, if they disagree with some deductions, because you mentioned a nickel and dime,
yeah,
they also have the right to appeal just that. If they appeal the nickel and dime deductions, does that put their case at risk for being found disabled?
It does not. Yeah, it does not. The medical issue, and this is important to make clear in the appeal reasons, that you're not disagreeing that you've been found medically disabled, or maybe you are. Maybe you're trying to do both. You disagree with the onset date established as well as the deductions. That's why it's important to word these appeals so that Social Security knows exactly what it is that you're disagreeing with. Because if you're just appealing the deductions, let's say they believe that you're getting free room and board, so they're slashing your benefits by upwards to a third. But that's not the case. You've been paying rent. You've been expected and will continue to pay rent. You may even owe some rent. You want to make it clear in the appeal that you're only disagreeing with the deductions to your benefits. You're not disagreeing with the medical determination of your period of disability, whenever it started. Making that clear in the appeal is very important so that you don't accidentally trigger another medical determination, right, and run the risk of having an unfavorable next medical determination saying, nope, no disability. Sorry, the previous person was wrong.
Yeah, so you've been found medically disabled, and here's your established onset date. We've just talked about if you disagree with that, you can appeal that, but there's risks to that. Meaning potentially could lose what they've given you. In a separate category, there's the SSI sort of technical reasons that you've been maybe deducted from. I think the max amount this year is 900 something for SSI. So if all of a sudden Social Security is saying, hey, you're going to get 400 or 500 because you own more than one car, or you and have this money in a joint bank account with your brother or mother or father or whoever, they may reduce your money. Now, if you disagree with that, you can appeal that. And that does not risk you losing your medical determination as long as you be specific. And I'm disagreeing with the deductions.
Yeah.
And you have 65 days to file that appeal. So the other thing too is maybe you don't disagree with those deductions, but because now you've won your SSI case and now you have some money coming in, let's say you've been living with your parents in kind, meaning they've been giving you free room and board, but now you want to move out. if your circumstances change, you should run down to Social Security and let them know, hey, I'm living by myself. I got this little apartment. I'm not saying it was that throughout the back pay, but what I am saying is my circumstances changed. I don't have the same free room and board or free whatever. Now I'm out. And you should run down to Social Security and let them know right away. Because then that deduction they may have made for the free room and board is now no longer there.
Yeah. And I would also recommend be ready to submit proof of this start of your rental payments. The more it's documented, the less there's any ambiguity that are you really paying rent, or are you just saying that so that you get more monthly benefits or your full check amount. Be prepared to supply evidence. But I like that recommendation. Get in touch with your local office as soon as possible, either giving them a call or appearing in person, so that your ongoing benefits can be restored. I also would recommend, be as sweet as possible, because I have seen agents, they may backdate it. They'd be like, oh, how long have you been paying rent? Well, I've been paying rent for the past 2 months. All right, I'll give you some leeway and restore the past 2 months. If you don't have a good relationship with that particular agent, they may say, well, your next month's check will be full, but anything in the past is in the past. You can appeal that decision, but it's obviously better not to have to go through a protracted appeal process by getting a person over at Social Security to see it your way from the start. Yeah, I like that bit of information to make people aware of. Always letting Social Security. It's actually a part of your responsibilities when you are awarded disability. Take a look at that list of what are my reporting responsibilities, especially for SSI. Changes to your living situation is an important one, and in this particular situation, it's one you want to do because it does increase the amount of benefits that you can receive by removing that deduction for free room and board.
Right. Let's talk about a little bit, and because we're talking about what happens if you win.
Yeah,
we've talked about closed period a little bit, partially favorable and fully favorable. And we've kind of talked about what you can expect sort of immediately. Some back pays, I just want folks to know, especially on Title II, if the back pay is kind of a larger amount, and I would say anything between $45,000 plus, $50,000 plus, if your back pay is going to be that larger amount, what can people expect as far as back pay of how long it might take for them to actually receive it? Their back pay, not the month, their back pay.
Yeah. It can be a longer process, and I think in fact this is probably a good question for our team who analyzes and tracks awards for our clients to really look into. There is actually, I believe Social Security has told us, or certain agents have told us, there is an actual dollar amount at which point there needs to be extra double confirmation. Two supervisors need to sign off on it, and it adds considerable time. In my experience, I think it adds maybe a couple months right around that ballpark before you get your back paycheck. And that's, knock on wood, things going right and not falling through the cracks. Over at the what they call the payment center, the office within the office in Social Security that handles payments, especially back pay. It's. I don't have the exact date. I believe my colleagues would have a better sense of the time frame for your back pay in terms of a larger Title II SSDI back pay.
Yeah, so I've been told that it's $50,000 is kind of the magic number that needs to be signed off by kind of a manager, and that it can take an additional 6 up to 12 months, depending on the amount. So kind of escalates there, because we've seen back pays as high as $250,000 that people are entitled to. So all of a sudden you see just dragging at the feet, or people need to sign off, and was the math done correctly internally?
So, also too, the other thing that can slow things down if you've got a fully favorable is if let's say you're eligible for both Title II and Title 16, meaning SSI and SSDI. And that can slow things down considerably too, because let's say your monthly amount, because there's a dollar for dollar offset between Title II or between SSDI and SSI. So let's say your dollar amount for Title II is $500 a month, and you just haven't worked and paid that much into Social Security, but you still have some. But the monthly amount for SSI is 900 and what is it, 16, 17, 900 and should look it up. So you would be entitled to an additional $400. So you're at least hitting the SSI amount.
Yeah.
If you get no deductions. And so what they do is they have to, it takes some time to evaluate how much money you're actually entitled to in back pay and from which program, because with SSI checks, as you know, the back pay comes in 3 installments over 12 months. So it's a couple $1,000 in the first kind of month or two after you get your notice award. You get another couple $1,000 at the 6-month mark, and then the remaining of your back pay at the 12-month mark. And then there's rules on how fast you spend it down. And again, we'll link the Navigating Notice of Award in the description. And Haley does a great job of kind of walking people through that. But so that's the other thing, kind of what options after you win. And the last thing I want to kind of cover is just app and recon options to winning is 2 to 3 years down the road, things to think about if you've won your case. And specifically what I want you to talk about is potentially a CDR. And what does that mean? And how do you, because I know you've done some CDR hearings at the local office.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk to folks a little bit about just generally, and we can have a whole other podcast about CDRs, but generally just kind of, if you won, what are your options and what things to look out for?
Yeah.